Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the VMware Networking and Security live stream. Now, today we are going to have back one of my favorite guests, Chris McCain, and a little backstory to this. So, we were actually at an internal event a couple weeks ago over in Scottsdale, Arizona, and he gave a presentation on something that, I mean, it got great response from everybody. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it, but I missed it, so I wasn't there. So I kind of want to get a little bit more of this information. We figured, why not do this in a public forum? So here we are on Twitch and on YouTube Live. Thank you again for joining us. And as always, remember, you can ask questions at any time. We encourage that. And, we want to be able to get to your questions live, and we want to be able to answer everything that we can. But without further ado, let me bring in Mr. Chris McCain. How you doing, Chris?
Good, Andrew. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. We did a little bit of work together yesterday. We were kind of getting our new setups going with OBS and everything. So We got a nice little new lower thirds. I think we look quite nice today.
This is super professional. I mean, you would never guess that we just figured this stuff out, right?
I know. Like it just happened,
Yeah.
So, I know that you're having a fun day over in Florida. I'm over here in Michigan, but we're on the inside here. We're going to talk a little bit about NSX Mindset, and I think that's a pretty cool thing, a pretty cool title. But let's get a little bit more in depth. Chris, what is NSX Mindset?
Yeah, I was kind of saddened that you didn't get a chance to see it in Phoenix, even though it got moved upwards, but you had already left. But look, the security mindset is really, it's not so much about technology. It's more of an industry-wide thing. Of course, I bring relevance to it from the VMware perspective where I can. But the premise of security mindset is this idea that if an organization wants to truly mature and be able to protect itself against constantly evolving threats, that security is not something that should exist in its own silo within the organization. So the same way a mindset is really the way you think about something, the way you approach problems, the way you perceive the world, security mindset is how do you approach security? How do you think about security in your organization? So there's a very humanistic element to the security mindset that I then tie into technologies, but ultimately it revolves around people. I think you and I can both agree that from a technology perspective, no matter how secure you get or want to be, there still has to be buy-in from the individuals of the organization where security becomes a priority. It becomes top of mind. It's not a byproduct of something you did for availability or manageability or something like that. It's truly top of mind when you design infrastructure.
Yeah, actually, so we're getting a couple hellos. We got Wendy saying hello, and we got Jason on YouTube saying, I still have 2 NSX Mindset t-shirts from one of the Chris VMUG sessions. So, you already have some fans.
Hey, so listen. So NSX Mindset was, the original, right? That was the OG of the mindset movement. And back then, the focus, it wasn't even much on security. It was really about changing the way you think about networking and security, because we had a lot of customers that were kind of moving to the cloud. And, of course, when you move to the cloud, you think about the physical network. What would you do, right? There's nothing to do in the physical network in the cloud because you don't have access to it. So you legitimately have to change the way you think about networking when it comes to the cloud, because you don't have access to physical switches to trunk out VLANs and do all that kind of stuff. You have to learn how to do networking in software for the cloud. So NSX Mindset was really, the OG of this whole movement, because it did force customers to think differently about networking. And so as we've evolved, we kind of took that same approach with security and said, well, wait a minute, security, it's not just about the technology. It's about the way you approach security, the way you think about security within the organization. So that's pretty cool that we got an old NSX Mindset viewer out there.
Oh, it is very cool. So, I got to say, you're right there because, back in the day, and like, I know, we both don't look very old, but we've been doing this for a little bit. We've been around in the networking world and security world. And it is one thing that I feel like in networking and security, it's always taken a back seat on a lot of times. Like it's IT was looked at as just nothing but a cost center. What is the return on investment that we're getting? What is the return that we're getting on purchasing all these networking equipment, all this stuff that we have out here, and then people are still getting hacked. And I even now even to jump into the future here when it comes to automation and software defined networking, if you don't make automation as part of your fundamental business, if you're just looking at it like it's a side aspect, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be successful in it. You have to really commit to that mindset, if you will. It's a perfect name for it. You have to commit as an organization to doing better, being better, and you're never done with it. Networking, security, automation, whatever. You're never just done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, look, if we look at it, I'll get fancy here with my my light board. If we look at kind of traditional infrastructure, we'll put vSphere here. So our compute layer. Okay. And of course, underneath that was the networking, right? Physical networking, we'll say. And then storage. And, historically, when we thought about security, it was really just, oh, hey, we're going to put a firewall out here and we'll have a team of people that are managing the firewall. And it'll control the ingress and egress to the data center. And maybe there were organizations that took security a little bit more serious and thought, oh, well, we'll send some traffic on some internal VLANs to the firewall to separate these different segments, whether it's prod versus dev or something like that. But that model, that legacy model, really the focus in security was isolated to this firewall team, right? You went to the storage team and they're like, I'm the storage guy, right? I make LUNs and I provide disks and things like that, right? You go to the physical network and like, oh, I make VLANs and I trunk stuff. And you go to the vSphere engineer and it's like, oh, I build virtual machines, right? But none of them would have really said, oh, I'm serious about security, right? I do security. I'm in charge of security. And that's why we are where we are today with respects to seeing so many organizations being on the wrong side of malicious threat actors, because that one entity of a physical firewall is not enough to protect against the way things have evolved from a hacking perspective. And so security mindset kind of flips this script around and says, okay, yeah, that's great that you have this physical firewall. We're not suggesting you get rid of it, right? It's a nice first line of defense to have. But within the data center, the storage team should be thinking, what can I do for security? That's supposed to be a lock, by the way. My art skills, my kindergarten art teacher told me I would never be an artist. She was right. So storage team should be thinking, what can I do for security? Physical networking team, what can I do? vSphere team, what can I do? And we could take this all the way up into, we've got virtual machines that are running applications. Well, what are the application developers doing for security? Are they designing and building apps with security in mind? And so if you look at it now, security mindset takes the entire organization and says, instead of us putting security into this one isolated space, if it becomes a pervasive part of infrastructure design, where storage and networking and compute and app developers are all looking at it, I think organizations have a much better chance of success in stopping the types of attacks that we're seeing these days. Because you have, I'm sure you've heard defense in depth, right? And we used to think about defense in depth as this idea that says, oh, we'd have a firewall, and we'd have IDS IPS, and we'd have WAF, and we'd have these different levels of security. But the reality is defense in depth should go beyond just the different security technologies into what are each of the infrastructure businesses doing to implement security.
Yeah, I think, to get a little bit deeper into what you're saying, to really hammer it out, you had storage security, you had physical firewall security, you had ACLs within, switches, and we had, ACLs on the layer 3 interfaces, we had private VLANs. You then can move up to the vSphere level, like you're saying, in the hypervisor area. We had WAN security. We had even, BGP security and routing protocol security to be able to prevent things from happening, like, routes, neighbor relationships being brought up when they don't need to be. But the whole idea is that is operationally complex to deal with continually. As you grow as an organization, it's easy when it's just solidified to one little area. But as you grow as a business, and then you have to start considering in application security on top of that, being able to correlate all that data, how to be able to figure out when an attack came in and how we're going to trace that all the way back and what portion failed and how can we lock that down, that was really, really hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think the other thing is, as security became more important because of the prevalence of attacks, a lot of organizations were kind of thinking, oh, we've got to go find this one magic bullet. We've got to go find this one tool that's going to solve all of these problems. And the reality is there's not one tool. So organizations should be going to the different silos that manage their infrastructure components and saying, look, you know, within the storage realm, what do you guys have access to? You don't need to worry about anybody else's opinion. What can you guys do to secure? And same thing with physical networking, right? What can the networking team do? Whether you're using Cisco or Arista or Juniper, whatever switching you're using, what do you have access to that's built into those components that you could use to increase the security posture of the organization? And then, of course, right, we're with VMware. So from the vSphere side, you know, how do we get customers to embrace this idea of NSX being the tool that they use, they own, right? I think that's more the important, that they own, that doesn't require buy-in from the physical networking or the storage team or any of that, to be able to add an element of security, or even better yet, to buy down risk in a way that leverages what they already built their infrastructure on. And, you know, I know you meet with a lot of customers. For me, most of the customers I meet with, probably the same for you, they're heavily virtualized.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, they've invested a lot in VMware already. In fact, the least virtualized customer I've ever met with was just this past week. And they said they were around 50 to 60% because they had a lot of legacy systems still running some physical and things like that. But they were virtual first initiative where over time, they're going to continue to get more and more virtualized. So when you think about that, if the bulk of your workloads are running virtual, NSX actually becomes one of the more critical tools you could use to protect your infrastructure, because so much of it is running on top of vSphere. And so, I think it's important for organizations to realize you don't have to get the vSphere team and the physical networking team and the storage team to agree on one tool, right? So let's get fancy here, and let's do it with a little diagram here, right? So if we did that, and we take our core infrastructure team, so we've got networking, we'll say compute, we'll throw security in there, right? Where they overlap here in the middle is not about having a centralized tool they can use. That's the mindset piece. Their overlap needs to be in the way that they think about security, not that the way they execute on security, because the networking team is going to execute on security differently than the vSphere team. And the firewall team or security team, from what I'm using here, they're going to execute differently than the compute and the physical networking. So we have to all go into this with the idea that if we each play our role and respect the others, that collectively we're going to end up with something that improves our organization. Oh, look at the fancy question. That's so cool.
I know.
I love it.
I forgot to take out the previous one that I made.
I saw the other one. I'm like, wait a minute. Nope, there's no question, because that one's the wrong one. So yeah.
I got to make another one now, because this isn't actually a question. It's more of a comment. It goes, the one thing I really like about NSX is the ability to provide host/guest level firewalling for virtual appliances, OVA/OVF VMs you deploy. And yes, I agree. I think that is one of the nice things about NSX, is the fact that you're able to do that.
Oh, so look, it just popped up here. Did you do that?
What? Yeah. What? The question up at the top left?
Was that Rumble Truck? Was that the bottom? That was his comment?
That was Rumble Truck. Yes.
I know. I saw it on the screen though.
Oh, you did? Well, look at that. See, now we're
guys. You're watching us learn how to do this live, right in here. No, that was super cool. It came up, and I could read the comments on there. So that's pretty neat.
Right, excellent. Yeah, I mean, hey, we might be really good at NSX and networking security, but sometimes other things we have to move along.
Hey, exactly. The whole live stream thing is new and fun and exciting, and we're trying to make it the same for the audience too. So, yeah. So, you know,
so going back on the mindset thing. So you're
yeah,
right, because there are so many different. Something that was always frustrating to me from working in the network world was you had so many different distinct ideas of what security is. You had the security team that was a lot of times worried about governance and compliance. You had the network team that was, you know, in some organizations, they might actually be the ones that are going into the, you know, the firewalls and dealing with the tickets and having to put them
right.
in. They're dealing with the end users, whereas security teams are dealing with the theoretical. They're working with, and I don't mean to sound this as insulting, but the book knowledge, because they're understanding about the MITRE framework. They're understanding about all these different
Right.
things.
Yeah.
But the two teams aren't talking to each other. They're literally just different souls. And the poor compute guy is sitting there going, I just want to run workloads, man. Like, what's going on? And then the application team can't even get a say at the table about it because they need to develop, they need more infrastructure to develop so they can get more products out quicker. And they need to be able to, and we're going to get into a whole other thing, I think, about coding and just being able to code securely and get it out there as quickly as possible. And I think, you know, being able to allocate infrastructure and brand new security policies quickly, east-west, helps a lot out with that. But I mean, Chris, I mean, I've seen that in a lot of customers. I live that life. I mean, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a critical piece to this, right? If we move up the infrastructure, and I kind of have it just drawn here in the line with the virtual machines, but that's really should resonate there with application development and coding, right? The way that you do these things should fit in line from a mindset perspective anyway with the other silos. And that is security is not going to be something that's an afterthought. When we design applications, when we write code, we're going to proactively do it in a way that improves the security posture of the organization rather than, you know, forces the security team to have to come back to us and say, oh, by the way, this change needs to be made. So I think that point you brought up, I'll put it a little differently here. But if we take these silos that we have, right? So we got virtualization, we got networking, we've got app dev, maybe we've got that physical firewall team, maybe we've got the storage team, whatever. You know, if each one of these different organizations is thinking about security, what I'm seeing from the customers that are the most successful from a security perspective, what happens is you have this SecOps team. And this SecOps team, like you just talked about, is responsible for the governance and the compliance, the monitoring, to understand that things are flowing in a way that means they're protected, or the identification of things that are unprotected. You even mentioned being able to monitor and correlate to determine if attacks have happened. That's certainly something that can happen at this broader level. And so there's a difference here between the SecOps versus what these different silos are doing with regards to enforcement. So I see organizations where SecOps would go down to the networking team and say, hey, look, I've got these two networks here that shouldn't be talking to each other. Fix it. I don't care what tool you use. I don't care how you do it. If you want to use Cisco ACI, do it. If you want to throw a Palo Alto firewall in between them, do it. If you want to put an NSX edge gateway between, do it. I don't care, right? I just know from a SecOps perspective, my job is to tell you, the networking team, that these things should not be communicating. And the same thing could happen with the virtualization team. SecOps could come down and say, hey, by the way, we've got this HIPAA application, and I'm seeing communication from a non-HIPAA area communicating to this application that should be HIPAA. Go fix it. And that virtualization team would go in and, you know, use NSX to create the rules that they need to, which then makes them compliant. But each of these silos is independently operating with this mindset that we are all going to participate in the security of the way things communicate in the organization.
And I think that's completely and utterly forgotten these days is, you know, as we're starting to move on to better systems. But when you had that separation of the virtualization was different from the networking security, from the app dev security to the physical firewall to the storage. And you're right, you were just passed down an edict from, you know, security to say, hey, like we got a compliance, coming in, we're trying to meet this. you got to go to the quality assessor and tell them that, hey, like, you need to do this. We'd be sitting there as the network team going, how the heck are we going to do this? And like, and then they would go, prove it. How are we going to prove that by showing that across the board, in all the different areas of different silos of security, that we're actually doing what we're like, that we're meeting the what the assessor is looking for.
Yep. Yeah. And that's where, we can go back to SecOps, right? So in my example, they come to the virtualization team, say, hey, we've got these non-HIPAA things that are communicating with HIPAA. Can you fix it, right? And we go in, we build some NSX rules, whatever, and we go back to SecOps, say, hey, we fixed it. SecOps then looks at the traffic flows and says, oh, perfect, right? We've been able to do that. We can easily prove that we can solve these problems. Oh, look, we got another comment.
Jason just said, I agree with Chris about SecOps, but having deployed a ton of NSX security, I see the real success is when upper management realizes the value of SecOps oversight. Ooh, wow, say that 3 times fast.
Yeah.
And I agree with you.
SecOps oversight.
So I agree with you. And you know what, this I think is one of those things that is difficult, is when you have security being told up top, in the management area, this company needs to be about security because you dealt with a security incident within your business, or there's a new CISO that's coming in that wants to make security first. It has to, yet again, be passed down to the engineers and to the security team. It needs to be pervasive, because if it's just passed to the security team, they go off and do it, but the network team doesn't have time, or they're not bought into it, or they don't realize the importance of security, it's not going to get done. It's just not going to get done.
No, absolutely. And that's where, there's some interesting examples that I can give. So situations like what I'm talking about here, right? When security comes as a top-down initiative, the accountability then shifts to these silos, right? So for example, if I'm in charge of the virtualization infrastructure, my job as the VP of infrastructure would be to go to upper management and say, hey, listen, we are 92% virtualized, and I've got this tool, NSX, that I can use to help control lateral movement in our infrastructure, which will allow us to buy down risk against the malicious use of commonly used protocols like RDP and FTP and SMB and DNS. And I can build these rules. I can also do micro-segmentation if I want to do our apps, and I can do macro segmentation. I got all this capability for 92% of our infrastructure, and I go to upper management and say, you've got this security initiative. Here's what I can do. Do you want me to do it? That's it. And again, I don't need any of these other silos to buy in on NSX, because we're simply talking about hypervisor-based firewalling. But that's my job. As part of this security mindset initiative, I go to upper management. Here's what I can do. Here's how I can solve the problem within my domain. Do you want me to do it? Now, this is where the tricky part comes in, because a lot of times upper management are like, oh, we got to be more secure. Oh, we got to be more secure. Then I bring you this solution and say, here, I can do it, which, by the way, is not for free, because nothing more secure will ever be cheaper than not having to secure it. And so now comes the question as to, what are you really prioritizing? Is security a priority enough to find the budget to be able to do it? Because you and I both know internal firewalling at the hypervisor is not a line item in any customer's budget. So this money has to be found somewhere, because it's not a line item in a traditional budget. Now, if upper management, again, role playing here, I'm the VP of infrastructure and I go to upper management and say, hey, here's how I can solve this problem. Do you want me to? If the answer is no, I'm going to find a napkin or a paper towel or something, and I'm going to write on it. And I'm going to say, would you mind just signing right here that you told me no? Right? That way, if something happens in the future, that's kind of my get out of jail free card. Because now I have the ability to say, well, I could have controlled the lateral movement, which might have not allowed the malicious actor to move throughout the environment. They might have left, but you said you didn't want to do it, right? So, we have to, we as VMware have to kind of help our customers navigate these waters with the upper management, so that they can figure out how to convince upper management, how to position this to upper management in a way that says, I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to help solve our security problem. and this is the tool that I can use within my domain. And whatever else anybody else wants to use, go for it. I think customers are surprised sometimes when that like, oh, we got Cisco ACI, and I'm like, great. They're like, well, wait a minute. Is that? Yeah, it's great, right? If you're going to use Cisco ACI to protect the physical flows I think that's a great idea for organizations to do. Are they going to be able to do it in the hypervisor? No. Are we going to do it in the physical network? No. Do we do it like nobody else can inside of the hypervisor? 100%, right? Every organization is going to have their competitive advantage. Luckily for us, our competitive advantage exists in an environment where it's 90-something% virtualized. So as an architect, it makes sense to focus on tools where you're solving the majority of your problem and then go solve the one-offs in whatever way you need to.
Well, and I think this kind of goes back down to what we were talking about earlier. It's having this pervasive mindset across the different silos of, security first. And I think that a lot of different organizations in their different silos will sit there, and it almost becomes well, yeah, I know that they could do that, but we can do that on the network side. We can do it on the storage side. We can do that on that. But at the end of the day, the infighting that could happen, or the politics that happen, are really holding back our ability to then do what we're supposed to be doing, which is protecting the applications. Now, there's a whole other conversation we could be having of applications that have not been upgraded in 14, 15 years or so, and they're running old OSs, which yet again, if they're virtualized, then I make the argument that with NSX, then because we're at the VNIC level, we can protect it better than what you could do inside the operating system. And that's a competitive advantage that we have there, I believe. I think that that's something that we can do that nobody else can do. But the whole idea still, yet again, is we need to come together as the different silos and try to solve the problem that is the constant uprising of infiltration into organizations, exfiltration of data, hacking. I mean, there's a bunch of things that are happening still in these organizations that we need to all rally together as an IT community and try to stop, because quite frankly, they're beating us right now. I mean, wouldn't you say so?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, it's attack after attack after attack, right? I mean, ransomware event after ransomware event, government agencies, schools, hospitals, private institutions, a lot of stuff is happening. But here, here's just to tag on to that. There are tools in each one of these, right? And we have to let go of the political battles. And for me, I think there's a couple criteria that I would want to use to determine what gets used in these, right? Number one is I want to find something that's built into the infrastructure. I want something that's not added on after the fact. I want it built into the infrastructure. So the same way NSX is built into the hypervisor, the same way Arista and Cisco build security products into the infrastructure. The second thing would be, I want it to be as close to the workload as possible without being inside the workload, right? I want that isolation. Now, does that mean that I would never use an agent? No, because sometimes it's the only option you have, right? So now you have this trade-off between efficiency, manageability, and security, and you have to decide, do I give up the security because I don't like the efficiency, or do I take the inefficiency because I need the security? So that's the kind of the art and science of being an architect, an enterprise architect today, is you've got to navigate these crossroads where different things could happen, and there's risks associated with each one of those. And then because there's risks, you have to mitigate those risks on top of that. So I look, we got some comments and some questions.
We do. So NJ Mike is saying, I can only imagine how this changes yet again when SmartNICs come into their own. I agree with you, and I think the SmartNIC world is going to be super exciting. I will say, as a slight comment to it, because we like to be, as you can tell, Chris and I are very open on this program. We'll say what our thoughts are. I do believe that it's not only is it going to be a game changer, but it's going to be a game changer for obviously newer OSs and newer boards that are able to support it. Remember, if you got an old 20-year-old box, SmartNIC's not going to be able to go in there. So, we're still talking about, I think SmartNICs are a wave of the future, but it's also going to be a wave of the future when you can get it into that hardware itself.
Yeah. So my take on SmartNICs, I don't see SmartNICs becoming this pervasive architecture through everything, but what I think they offer is going to be amazing for those use cases where it's really good, right? Maybe you need more compute power for an application, so you want to offload the networking and security to the card. Or, I mean, if you think about the capabilities we could have long term, right? Maybe you solve the encryption problem, being able to use the card, right, to encrypt and decrypt. And now you find particular areas of your infrastructure with applications that are super critical with very sensitive data. So now you got smart NICs and these that are doing your encryption, but over here, I'm able to have that same security model with NSX, even though the architecture is different between doing it on a smart NIC versus doing it in the hypervisor. But that flexibility is going to be awesome because it's going to solve problems for organizations that are looking at these things going, you know, how do I fix the efficiency part? Or what if there's too much CPU, or, you know, it doesn't do encryption. So smart NICs are going to be really cool to see how we solve those problems.
We do have a comment and then a question. So we're gonna quickly pass over the comment, Rumble, because I don't want to be rude to the person that's waiting on the question. But you know, Rumble says, yeah, for a super dense VMware shop, NSX is pretty easy sell in my opinion. We're 99.9% only got one physical Windows box left. That's awesome that you have pretty much got rid of all your physical because they bring on their own interesting problems and such. So awesome.
Got that one box.
But let's get to the question. All right, so
yeah.
I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. A question regarding the administration. Is it possible to troubleshoot the rules after applying them in the NSX firewall to know if specific rule passes or denies the traffic? Chris, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. And then you can chime in as you need, because I know you're big on logs and capturing information. But there's a couple different ways you could do this. Obviously, with logging, right, we have the ability to determine whether a rule has been hit or not been hit. I've seen organizations that will start to build out some specific rules to control traffic, but they'll have an any allow rule. And if the any allow rule is hit, you'd be able to go to a log and see it and say, oh, okay, well, if something's hitting this, that means we don't have a rule that's controlling this type of traffic. There's also things like vRealize Network Insight, ARIA Operations for Network. ARIA Operations for Network is this broader infrastructure management tool where you can watch the flow of traffic between source and destination, whether that's a user sitting at a laptop somewhere and moving through a WAN, SD-WAN into the data center, but you'll see the host it's on, the firewall rules it goes through, the switches it goes through. It ingests all of this information so that you can track that data. Plus, we have NSX Intelligence, right? If you want to really see flows and things like that. So different options. Yeah.
Just to add into Chris, you know, like you say, NSX Intelligence, you know, someone brought it up. Jason, actually, I just brought up the comment ARIA Operations for Logs, which used to be, VRLI, vRealize Log Insight. That is the way when I was troubleshooting and I had a rule that was out there, I made sure that the logging was enabled on the rule. And then that way, if I wanted to see if the rule was being hit, I would see the allow or the deny that was coming through on the logs. You can even go, if we want, and I know you didn't ask for this, but you can go even deeper, that if you want to make sure that the rule is actually being applied to the virtual machine, you can go into NSX CLI on the host itself. You can identify the VNIC, and then you can assure yourself that the rule is actually being applied to the VNIC appropriately. So if you have questions, and if it's set as applied to in DFW or applied to as a group, there are many different ways that you could do it. So the long-winded answer to a short-winded, yes, you can.
Hey, I was just about to do this. I was going to draw the rabbit hole that Andrew was about to go. Anytime you start talking about logs and automation and capturing data, boy, Andrew, your cheeks turn red, your eyes open wide.
I do like coding, and I do like. I mean, I
know you do.
Troubleshooting. I mean, that was my job. Was like I was the last escalation point, so it was like, well, great. All right, I'm gonna go figure this out. DV filter. Jason just brought it up. DV filter. You are absolutely right.
Yeah, exactly. So. So you know,
back to and NSS, thank you very much, no problem. That's why we're here to help you out. So
yes,
Chris, going right back into, I forgot where we were because we had a whole bunch of great comments, but so let's try to let's try to get back on track here. So we talked about SecOps, we talked about NSX and the different ways that we can. Do we want to touch upon, you know, what do you have anything else particularly they want to touch upon, or do we want to talk about workloads in general and application security? How would you like to drive this, because you are the NSX Mindset?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, and especially as somebody who kind of works with customers to try and help them figure out what their data center strategy looks like, I tend to just say workload, right? And whether that's VDI, virtual machine, container, whatever it is, my philosophy is our customers should not have to re-architect for specific workloads, right? We should have infrastructure that is dynamic enough to support whatever it is that customers want to do. And I think VMware is building a very good networking and security strategy that solves the problem of letting organizations build infrastructure and then run whatever they want to run on top of it while maintaining this centralized security model across those different things. So I call them workloads. I know you're very big into a lot of the different nuances of those workloads and how you do those things. I just tend to look at them holistically, like, hey, look, I want to be very singular in the way that I deploy security within my hypervisor, regardless of what the workload is. So I would be the guy going to you saying, hey, just solve the problem, and then you would do all your magic with your automation and using all the different tools that VMware has available.
And you know what? I don't think you're off base, to be quite honest. I think you're right. A workload is a workload, and we can't look at it as like, oh, it's a VM or it's a container anymore. We were, at the very end of me being in the enterprise world before I came over to VMware was we didn't want to dictate to our customers being, in this case, the developers and the application owners, where they can go. They didn't want to be told, oh, you have to go into VMC, or you have to you can't stay on-prem, you have to go here, or you have to go public cloud. They didn't want us telling them that. They made the choice of the tools that they want to use. They made the choice of whatever was available to them. They felt for, let's say, like they had data protection that they had to keep it on site at this geographic location. We can't tell them, well, no, like you're not allowed to do that. So we had to get it in our heads, is the infrastructure people, that we're not dictating to them how they should do their application development and their security and their deployments. They should be able to tell us, and then we have to be able to accommodate that. And that's the new world that we're in.
Yeah. I'm going to build this under here, and I'm going to give you access, whether it's through APIs, integrated tools, whatever it is. I'm going to give you access to the tools you need to develop and deploy secure workloads. You want to do that with containers, then you can consume the tools that I give you. If you're going to do that with virtual machines, then you can do that through automation, self-service portal, manually deploying, creating security groups, whatever it is. But our job is to build the infrastructure and give the tools, and then the application owners and developers find how they consume those tools to be able to have that secure infrastructure.
Absolutely. And, it's being able to have the same type, or at least as
close. Hey, is there a question, or is that left over?
That was just a comment from Roman Tuber that was really insightful. He appreciated it, so I wanted to throw it up there for you as well.
All right.
But I think what we want to do is we want to try to make sure that whatever world that they move into, that we as an infrastructure team can meet their needs. And at the end of the day, developers want to be able to. I always heard this. Oh yeah, let me take away that question area because I did notice that. They want to be able to deploy as quickly as possible. I mean, we were, as infrastructure people, as network people, as virtualization people, we were looked at on operations side as we're too slow. We can't keep up with newer technology. We're holding up their ability to be able to develop and deploy quicker. So we need to be able to meet those demands in a brand new way. Be it if you're on-prem, we need to be able to have cloud-like experience there, because if they are in the public cloud or if they are in VMC and AWS, if they can deploy it quick, but then they need to come back for cost reasons or whatever, they don't want to come back to 20 years ago networking and infrastructure. That's not acceptable anymore.
Yeah. And you know what? To be honest, that's the transition, or I should say the revival of the old NSX mindset, which was heavily focused on networking, because now we're getting to this point where if I want to automate the deployment of some application, and I want the networking and I want the security, from a developer standpoint, do you want to have to automate against a physical fabric and then the inside of the hypervisor to get both network and security? Or would you rather just allow the physical fabric to be static, stable, reliable, like it is in native AWS or native Google Cloud or native Azure, and let the consumption of networking happen in software where it's much easier to automate? But again, that's a change in thinking. So now the architecture teams have to look at their environment and say, well, wait a minute, for this long time, I've been so tied to this physical switch, right? And I love my switch, and I can pet my switch, and I can touch it, and I see it, right? And I'm going to go do all these things. But if you're a network engineer, the beauty of this is the physical network should be set up so that it just passes packets. Design it once, wire it once, leave it alone, let it be. And then let the dynamic nature of networking happen in software, where now we can open up this opportunity to developers to be able to consume networks on demand as they need, without having to touch the physical fabric, where we then have a very large failure domain in the event that we did something wrong and brought that down, right? So through new VPC, whatever it is you want to build, we have the ability to give the developers that self-service model through automation and consumption that supports the way they want to work.
There was 2 points I want to make, and because 2 things popped in my head. Number one, we talk about all these things, like all the different technologies that you can use, all the on-prem. We were just naming off a whole bunch there just in talking about that. But when you go to an application team, a developer, and you start explaining to them all the different nuances and how things are, they go, I don't care. I just want to be able to deploy my app. That doesn't matter to me. That's your problem, not my problem. My problem is to code quick. Your problem is to put it out there. And then the other one that and this was like really, really huge, and it was like a moment of clarity, was I was talking to a development team, and they wanted to move from one data center to another, and they didn't know their security schema. And as the network guy that was also security minded, I sat down with them and I said, well, guys, you wrote the app. How do you not know how the app works? And they looked me dead in the eye and they go, well, you're the network and security guy. How can you not tell us how it all interconnects? You're the one that puts in all the firewall rules when we submit the tickets.
Right.
Oh, wow. You know what? that's both sides are right in that. Like, that we're not wrong. So when you start bringing in these infrastructures that are now all of a sudden a private cloud or a public cloud or a hybrid cloud, and you're able to now allow the developers and the application teams to see their rules, to implement them themselves, be it infrastructure as code or self-service, and one-offs going into the firewall and the DFW and NSX, all these different things, they now have an understanding of how their app works way better than just submitting a ticket and, oh, well, it is what it is. And you know what, when hopefully I never have to move or redeploy this thing.
Yeah. And the truth to that is that prior to having access to something like NSX, even if a developer wanted to create with security top of mind, if there wasn't the availability of that technology, they couldn't do it. But now it's there. So having that technology gives them the ability now to embrace this security mindset and say, okay, since the tool is there, now I have the ability to consume and I have the ability to develop with security in mind, leveraging that underlying architecture that's going to protect it.
I've always said that infrastructure teams, we need to become more consultants instead of just the, behind lock and key. We keep the configurations and the secrets of the network behind, the curtain, and you're never able to see it. You just give us the ticket and we'll handle it. Don't you worry. That's not how it is anymore.
Yeah. I think part of the issue too is historically I would say the working model in IT was, look, I want to build something and I'm going to build something that I just want to run. And I want to know that I know every part of it. We didn't think about, actually, how do I build something that solves the business need, right? How do I build something that can be consumed in a way that helps the company? There's a whole different set of questions you ask when you're actually trying to achieve infrastructure that helps solve business problems versus infrastructure that just runs.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very different.
And RumbleTrack brings up a good thing. It goes, that implies that the app owners, devs want to actually have self-service for firewalling security of their apps VMs. LOL, and it gives a sad face. You know what? And Rumble, I want to hit upon that because I think that's a great thing. I've had conversations with customers now. So in my past and where I've come from, it's been a development-heavy shop, or most of them have been development-heavy shops that you get about 10%, I would say, that really wanted that. Like, if I can give them control of everything, they would take the keys and they would run with it and they would never call me ever again. I had about 80% of them that, I needed to help them out. They wanted that consultative approach. They wanted that white glove treatment, some more than others, but they wanted help, but they would embrace it if they actually had the help. And then you had others, the last 10% that did not, they would go kicking and screaming. Now, I do also have customers that are out there that want to embrace automation, but they don't want to give it because there's still a little bit of trepidation there where they want to embrace automation, but it's only for the infrastructure teams. It's only for the network teams because they don't fully either trust or they want to get the guardrails down. They want to be able to figure out first before they release it to the app owners and devs and make sure that they can't do anything really, really bad. You know, automation, the whole scary thing that you can break a lot of things really quick, that old mindset. I think you're right, Rumble. It depends on your organization. It depends on the application teams, but it doesn't mean that you can't innovate and you can't move forward. It just, what is going to be right for your company and your organization, and how do you start to slowly, as Chris is saying, change that mindset?
Yeah, I think what Rumble's pointing out is one of the things that we kind of said earlier on. It doesn't matter how good the technologies are. You have to have people that are bought into the idea of, I want to protect the organization, right? And that's what he's saying, is that sometimes there's application developers that are like, if I got to think about security, this is impacting my ability to just write the code that I want to write in the way that I want to write it. It's adding these additional restrictions around what I do, which, yeah, it's problematic. But again, nothing that's more secure will ever be easier to do than not having to secure it. So it's a great comment, because that's really the crux of this. How do we get these individuals across these different silos to buy in together so that we do have developers that are concerned, right? And maybe it's an HR problem, maybe it's an upper management problem. That's what we have to figure out. What is the source of this? How do we bring together the right people with the right mindsets to create secure infrastructure from top to bottom?
Well, and I could be, old man on a hill here, like yelling at cloud, but like, look, the developers are pressured themselves. What do we do these days? We're used to applications on our phones having updates on maybe a 24-hour basis, and iterative development, like agile processes, get code out as quickly as possible. And what it in turn does is it minimizes the QA. It rushes the development process, and then thus sloppy code can come out. Now, right. It takes time to write out CI/CD pipelines that do all the different complex checking and checking of regression testing and all these different things. So we, as the infrastructure team, have to work with them, be their friend, be their consultant, to go, look, we understand your struggles too. We're here to help, and here's how we can help you secure your app. So if that does happen, guess what? We can find that attack, we can lock it down, we can make sure that you're safe, and we give you time to fix the problem and not have data exfiltration happening.
Yep. And it kind of goes back to when you were talking about monitoring and watching flows. I mean, having those types of tools that see what's going on, understanding the anatomy of attack, will help then identify, how did this happen, and how do we assign accountability to these different elements of the organization so that can't happen again in the future. And so I think I'd be irresponsible not to mention this, but last year at Explore, we did a security mindset event. It was a very successful event. We put it together last minute, so we were super happy with the way that it went off. But last year's event was, a company had been attacked, and what we wanted to show the audience in very dramatic fashion was what a security war room looked like. What happens when there's a security incident, and we bring together these different individuals who are all using their tools and analysis to say, oh, here's how the attack happened. Here's what I saw. Here's what they got. Here's the ports and the protocols and the systems and all this kind of stuff. So it was really cool how we did it. This year, we're doing an encore at Explore. It's a Monday event, 11 a.m. it starts. It's called VMware NSX Security Mindset, the Architects Forum. And so what we did is we put a different spin on this. And we said, okay, here's what happens if a company gets attacked. And that attack is then being used as a catalyst. So upper management steps in and says, okay, we were attacked and we don't want it to happen again. And we're going to use that as the initiator for change in our environment. And so a whole set of requirements comes up, and we have individuals that from all the different silos who are helping design infrastructure to prevent attacks from happening again. So for those of you watching, if you happen to be going to VMware Explore, be sure to register and check out this security mindset event. Looks like we got a comment.
Yeah, we got a couple of fun comments. So if I ever find the magic agreement to get buy-in from everybody without question, I'll make sure to share it here. Please do, Rumble. I like that.
Actually, Rumble, if you find it, just hit up Andrew and I directly. We'll patent it, and then we'll all retire from having it.
We're gonna make money. Jason goes, I was there for most of that mindset event at
Oh
Explore.
yeah,
Skipper and David. Yep, nice.
yeah, yeah. That was
So did you make the? Because I wasn't there for the war room. I mean, was it like actually like at 2 a.m, everyone was red eyed, they had coffee and they were grumpy? Because that's what a real war room is. I've been in them.
So we did add a dramatic flair to it with, one of the guys had been called in. He was on vacation, so he had to come in. He ran in late with his suitcase and his Hawaiian shirt. We definitely gave a dramatic flair to it when we did it. So it was a super fun event, and we're hoping it'll be just as exciting and fun this year as it was last year.
Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Chris has some ideas for some very, very fun things this year. We're not going to give it away. We're not going to spoil it, but I'll tell you.
No, we won't. But
check
definitely.
Social media. It's coming up. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. We do have
Don't
a
miss
question.
event.
So, Lee Karov, I'm going to say, okay, hopefully I have your name right. Any pointers on how to transfer accountability across the org? Okay, wow, this is a great question. Okay.
Yeah,
Man, really good question. So a lot of times I've seen organizations, they try to go for name and shame. I've heard that before. They try to do a show back when it comes to how much the resources that they are consuming within the environment. I've always heard, the idea of doing chargeback with a lot of organizations, honestly, in my opinion, do not have the ability to do chargeback correctly. So usually it comes back to showback and name and shame. For example, if you have, like Chris was saying earlier, where the application comes up or you go up to upper management, like he's got up there and he pointed up there and they go, nope, we're not going to do it. Even though we know, you have them sign that no. What you do is, let's say if it was centralized on an application, they just go, we're not going to fix that bug or we're not going to fix that problem. We don't have time to patch the code. We don't have time to upgrade the OS. It's just not in our pipeline right now. What you do is you kind of like, you show it out there that, look, they are not doing this. We put a percentage of risk. And then it sounds really harsh, but sometimes you have to project that up and go, look, we made the recommendation. We showed that they need to go fix this. They do not want to do that. The accountability, this is not on us as the network security, whatever team that you're on, it is on them at this point. We've given them the recommendation, but we can't make them do the work. Chris, what would you say?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think actually the two different security mindsets, the one we had last year at Explore and the one we have this year, kind of cover the answer to this. So first and foremost, if we're looking to understand where accountability lies, it's about making sure that we have the appropriate tools to identify how things are happening in our environment. So if we can look and we can see that we are most vulnerable within our virtualization infrastructure, the data doesn't lie. So if the data tells us it's in the virtual infrastructure, well, then the accountability then is on the vSphere team to figure out how you solve that problem. If the data tells us that, hey, it's actually in these physical systems that we have over here, well, then it might be more on the networking team where, hey, that's where the accountability lies. So the data never lies. That's why having good data is going to help. But that's more of a reactive identification of accountability. So that was what we did at Explore last year. And so that's why this year's different. And the twist we're putting on it is more about proactive accountability. So in the Architects Forum, what we wanted to do was bring together networking, virtualization, application development, firewall, storage, bring the architects together and say, listen, here's our business requirements. Look at these business requirements. Think about your portion of the infrastructure and solve the business problem proactively. Right? Before this happens again, take these business requirements and tell me how you would solve that problem. And so I'm looking forward to this because I don't watch any of what these architects do before Explore. I want this to be, so when they do this, it's the first time I'm going to see, what did the networking team come up with? What did the app dev team come up with based on the business requirements and the constraints and the risks that they're given? So, the best way to do it is either proactively involve everyone so that nobody feels like they're left out. Everybody feels like they have something to offer the overall security posture. But then at the same time, you have to have the tools monitoring the infrastructure to identify where the vulnerabilities exist so you can identify which teams are best suited to mitigating that risk.
And this goes back to our conversation of being able to correlate all the data with the different security, methodologies that you have, back in the day. Now we're integrating that as much as possible in today's networking security world. It's looking at all of the, the logging and such, being able to, you need to be able to trace that out to be able to show accountability, to then be able to transfer accountability appropriately. If you don't know that, or you can't come with facts and data, you can't transfer accountability at all. So just
100%.
a couple things. Jason says we're grumpy from the jet lag. Well, yeah, but you'll be in Vegas. So you know what? No excuses.
Yeah, exactly. There's no jet lag in Vegas.
Sonia says, I am thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Hope to be able to attend the event. Well, you know what? We hope to see you there, Sonia. So
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm glad you are enjoying the conversation. And then Lee Karov says, thanks, good stuff. And you know what? Like I said, that's why we're here. We're here to help.
Yeah.
So, we've had a great conversation here. I think we're coming up to the top of the hour here. So we're at 54.
Yeah, our soap opera hour is just about up.
We know
free.
We know everyone's busy. We know that you all have a working life. So, you got to get back to it. But what we want to do is we'll leave you with a couple closing comments. So, Chris, let's recap one more thing. Oh, yeah, and Leah's saying when's the next one? We're going to be doing one next week. I will make it public somehow, some way. We'll share it on LinkedIn. We're on VMware NSX, obviously, as you see here on YouTube, and then we're also on Twitch. I will find some way to be able to get the latest schedule out there, but definitely next week sometime, just so you know. So to wrap up our deep conversation about NSX Mindset, well, if you were going to give that quick elevator pitch to somebody of why they should be there at VMware Explore, what is it going to do? How is it going to change their mind? How is it going to be impactful for them to be able to take that back and utilize that or convince people or break down silos? Chris, how are you going to do that?
Well, look, the first thing that anybody has to do in order to change is to get educated, right? There has to be some internal motivation to change, which often comes from being educated about something. And this isn't just IT, right? I mean, this could be weight loss, quitting bad habits, whatever it is. There's some education that has to happen with sneakers. I'm at home. I'm not wearing sneakers today. They're all upstairs, Jason.
He's barefoot.
But hey, maybe the better answer to your question, Andrew, why should they go to Explore? Go to Explore to see what sneakers I show up in. How about that?
Jason knew it. He figured it out before you even said it.
Yeah. That's the real winner. Get there to see what sneakers I'm wearing. No, but yeah, look, at Explore, our goal is to educate somebody enough that they can change the way they think about networking and security, which then helps them proactively throughout their own personal career try and figure out, how do I become an asset to my organization? How do I add value to my organization? For me personally, I add value by wearing cool sneakers and having people come out to see what I'm wearing. It's like Paris fashion show.
I got to say, I agree with you. You don't be afraid to learn something new. Don't be afraid to take a chance. And I know that's like, it's one thing to say it at this side of the table, but I'm telling you, some of my favorite moments in all of IT was me just going out and taking a chance and going to learn something and then trying to implement it in the company with appropriate research and risk, estimation and figuring out. Rumble says never stop learning, and that is the absolute truth. You do not want, especially in the IT industry, to stagnate. And you want to be able to incite change in an organization, show that you're willing to learn, show that you're willing to change mindset, show that you're willing to be wrong and make mistakes. And I'm telling you, like, more often than not, that is going to be the biggest driver of change in an organization than anything else.
Yep.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Chris, so much for being back. This was your second time back. And you know what? We're hoping to have you for a third time, where I think we're going to go a little bit more in depth in some of the security ones from the very first video that we did. It was pretty awesome, getting a lot of views. All the shows, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, are up on the YouTube playlist. Every single one. This will be available immediately, and you can watch it back. You can make fun of us all you want. You can add more comments. We're more than willing to listen and learn from you all. And if you have suggestions on future shows that you want to watch us or things you want us to talk about, tell us. We are completely open to talk about any topic. We're going to start bringing back more live demos again and bringing up the NSX Manager so that you can see it. More Chris drawing, and I'm hoping that he's going to draw some more pretty pictures about me jumping down the rabbit hole.
There you go. Andrew, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks so much. All right, Chris, I'll be right back. I'm just going to wrap this up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of the VMware Networking and Security live stream. We will be back next week. I will give you exact dates when I have them. We have a couple interesting shows that are coming up. And then, if I may say, at the end, after VMware Explore, we have some very exciting shows that are going to be coming up. Can't tell you yet, but I'm telling you, they're going to be very exciting. You're not going to want to miss out. So thank you very much, and we will see you next time on the live stream. See ya.